Bravo!
Merry Christmas, y'all.
Merry Christmas. Mele Kalikimaka. It's the thing we like to say in Hawaii. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy you're here. And of course, oh my gosh, they just started a really loud noise outside my window. So, Brett, you're going to have to do most of the talking.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. What are we going to do? Welcome, everybody, to this special edition of the Christmas Mysteries. Is it really annoying, Brett? Can you hear that really loud? Good.
Not bad.
Okay.
Not bad.
This is part two. This is part two of a series that we started last Christmas, and it's episode number 58, if you want to refer back to that. But this is part two, and what we're doing is we're exploring the astrological and astronomical underpinnings of Christmas, like all the traditions and all the things that we do around this time of year. And it's fascinating to me because it's helping us reframe a holiday that, I don't know about you out there, but for me, it lost its like soul and meaning for me a while ago. And so bringing the astrology and the connection to the astronomy back into the story of this time of year is really powerful. And it's something that I'm passing along to my daughters. And it feels really important that all of us astrology lovers, sky lovers, that we know these stories and we can continue threading them through with our families. So Brett, thank you for being here for part two. I've been looking forward to this for a year.
Right
on. Before we dive in, I just have to let you know that there are only about 12 hours left for you to join the inner circle. So for those of you who have been like on the fence and thinking maybe you'd like to join the inner circle, now is the time. We won't open up again until the summer solstice, or the solstice in June, which I know for some of you would be the winter solstice. So if you'd like to have a different astrologer, mastery teachings, guidance and support as we go into 2021, the inner circle is the place to be. We would love to have you. Go to astrologyhub.com/IC as an inner circle 21 to join us now. That's astrologyhub.com/IC21. Today is December 23rd. So if you're listening to this later, you might have missed the window, but that's okay. You can join us next time. And thanks to all of you who have already jumped in. It's so incredible to see all the new names and faces. Everyone's introducing themselves. Welcome to the inner circle. All right, so Brett, where do we begin?
Give yourself a gift that will unwrap you continuously. The gift of astrology and these mysteries. Yeah, we did connect last year. If you guys want to review, it was episode number 58 on this Astrology Hub podcast, which is many, many episodes further along now. And Amanda and I spent most of our time speaking then about Santa. Now, this introduces the opportunity for a very important warning here. Okay, this is like a big spoiler alert, folks. So I'm just going to take my time. If you have some little ears around who are currently exploring the amazing magic of Saint Nick and all that, this isn't the episode for them. Bring them back in a few years or whatever it will be. All right, we good? Pause the things. Hide your screen. Okay, we're good. Sweet. So, because y'all, Santa Claus is fake, but he might not be. All right, I found that out from the Facts of Life on the TV screen when I was a kid, and which I don't think TV should do. And they didn't give a spoiler alert, so I checked in with my sister, who's 14 months my elder, and she's like, "Yeah, you idiot." And then that was the end of it all for me. It was pretty sad, actually. But really what inspired this thing that I call the Christmas mysteries was my nephew's awakening, Kyle, who I wasn't there, but I heard how it went. It was around Easter time, another one of these very important solar holidays, and lunar, if you will, for that one, which we might even get to today, but probably later. But Amanda and I did talk about Easter this year too. Yeah, so Kyle had a friend over who lost a tooth, and it was a molar. And Kyle's like, "Dude, you're stoked. That's $5," referring to his local tooth fairy economics. And his mom overheard that, my sister, and she was like, "Well, you know, there's different tooth fairies and we don't know how others work," because she didn't want to lay that $5 trip on this kid's parents. And Kyle went into his room and the door shut, and he came out, I guess, 15 minutes later and said, I'm going to ask you a question, Mom, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you the tooth fairy? And she said, yeah. She wanted to be honest. She promised to be honest. And they had lived in Spain for some time, where it's not a fairy that comes to give you change for your tooth, but it's a little rat. And he goes, are you Ratoncito Perez also? And she said, sí, yo soy Ratoncito Perez también. And that was it. And they had just come back from like a big Easter egg hunt in DC where they were living at the time, like a huge one, right? And he's like, and the Easter bunny? And she goes, yeah. So all those people we were just with, they were all lying to us. And she said, well, it's not really a lie. And he goes, oh, and I don't even want to ask about the big guy. And like the door slammed and he was done like, for the day. It came out like after dinner. And interestingly, he's chosen, well, now he's 15 and he's out of that cloud a little bit. But for years and years and years, he protected that mystery for himself, which I actually really honor. There's an important truth of preserving myth and mystery and storytelling and the fairies and the gnomes and all this for the kids, you know? And I mean, I think that that's one thing that Steiner certainly got right. Although at the same time, there are kids who are excited to learn to read and write and do the maths ahead of time, according to that schedule, some so to each their own. And we can see it in their charts, of course. And, you know, I got to say, well, I'm there, that it's really cool to be on the podcast like hours after my beloved was on in the other room with her new show about astrology for kids and parents, which is going to be a really exciting thing to witness. So maybe the first time 2 podcasts from the same household. I don't know, but here's to that.
Definitely. This is a record.
Right on. We love it. Well, someday Koa will have a show. But right now he's 5 and we're trying to sort out like how to do this Christmas thing with him. So when I asked my nephew and his 2 sisters, my nieces, you know, one time I was actually visiting them in Tokyo and they had their whole Christmas thing happening. It was solstice time. And said, hey, well, tell me, what is Christmas about? And you get this like long, intricate story about Santa and the elves and Mrs. Claus. And they have that elf on the shelf cat. I don't know if some of you guys have turned on to that. It terrifies me. It feels like it's sponsored by the NSA or something, because like it says it's a Christmas tradition, but it's like 10 years old. And the whole thing is you get an elf called Joe, or you give him his own family name, and the parents hide him in new places every day. And the kids have to discover him, but not touch him. And he's basically there to report to Santa whether you're being naughty or nice. Which is tricky. I was playing that song the other day on my saxophone, right? Like, you better be nice, that whole trip. And Koa started singing along. And I like couldn't resist saying, you know, man, that's just kind of like this trip that parents say to keep kids nice around this time. But then later that night, I was totally regretting it because he was being naughty. And, you know, I was like, man, I just like totally like showed my cards, and I can't like force the Santa control system on this unruly gentleman at 5 a.m. Anyway, so in the last podcast, we spoke a lot about Santa and the potential shamanic roots of Santa Claus and the elves, or many places that goes to Sinterklaas and Schwarzschild, which is a very interesting thing that hopefully will get dismantled this year, but also might reach back to Odin and his ravens. We talked a little bit about the historic Saint Nick, but mostly I want to share what has come in for me in my designs of creating like series of Christmas mysteries. And the point of it is this, like when the kid has their great awakening, right, which is that the Santa Claus is fake, that could take all magic away. And it actually happens that way quite often when you speak with people.
Oh yeah, it did for me. And it took a long time for me to believe in magic again. And one thing I just wanted to offer, Brett, is the way that I've framed this with my only Madeline so far, because Sophia still believes, but I think she may be protecting the mystery. I think she may sort of know, but is that it's not fake. it's the spirit of generosity, and the spirit of generosity moves through us, and we do its role of giving in joy. And so it's not dead and it's not fake. It's just, it's more of an energetic spirit, and that now we get to pass that spirit along, and then they get to share it with people. And so it's another way to frame it. But I also love bringing in the what you're going to bring, which is the next phase of this initiation with the astrology and the astronomy as well.
Yeah, well, I'll say like my favorite bit has actually been my buddy Jake at one point told me that when his kid went through the awakening, he did what his father had done for him, which is like, see, now you get to know that we can each be Santa Claus. And like I was like tears in the eyes, because it's really a heartwarming thing. It's really beautiful. He said, okay, so this is how it works. We find somebody around who needs a gift and we bring it, and they don't know who it comes from. And the kid picked this old woman on the street who he sees every day come out to get her newspaper with bare feet in the cold. And he's like, we need to get some slippers for Mrs. Woman down the street. And they like ninja delivered some slippers, right? And then every day he would see the lady in her slippers, and right. So he knew that he was like doing this beautiful thing, which I love so much. And that goes back into the tradition actually. So some say about Saint Nicholas, who was like at least modeled after a true like Catholic priest, who ended up living his days out in Turkey because of the persecutions that were happening in his day and age. But he, it said, would leave gold coins in like boots that were left outside. And some say that that's kind of where the Santa thing comes from. I see it reaching much deeper than that into history or herstory, like Saturnalia festivals in Rome are like undeniable, and then just the winter traditions and the shamanic traditions. So where I like to start is with the tree. And so I sat with Koa for some time, and we were looking outside, and I said, so tell me the difference between that tree and that tree, right? And one was a pine and the other one's an oak, right? So, and he got to learn words like coniferous and deciduous, right? And Koa likes science, so that was cool. But it's like, so what does the evergreen teach us? And I let him like bring me to, well, it always stays green. And you can hear it in the name, right, Koa? Yeah, it's like, what do you hear in coniferous? Oh, these cones. And that was cool too. But so what does the tree that loses its leaf teach us? And we talked about seasons and composting and the energy given to the soil so that the seeds can grow healthy. And then we talked about the evergreen and how it's a reminder that we can make it through these cold and dark times. And I like to start there first and foremost. I just yesterday was in Sedona and had lunch at the spot that I love, and got to speaking with the bartender because I was sitting at the counter about what I was doing there, which was a bunch of ceremonies. And he's like, well, what kind of ceremonies? And I talked to him about Jupiter and Saturn, and which he had been looking at. And he revealed after some time in our conversation that he practices like old Nordic pagan traditions. And we were talking about the tree, and he said that in that tradition, from what he learned, and I think it's maybe a bit modern, like a modern twist of an old thing, but he said that what you would do is you would light a tree outside of your house if your house was a safe place for travelers in the cold. So like that was to let people know that they were welcome in your place, and that often they wouldn't come in, but you'd leave boots that you were done with out by the tree, and people would take them to keep their feet warm as they were traveling and in migration and whatever it may be, which is super beautiful.
Wow. I love that. How beautiful. I mean, to think that people were that gracious and welcoming to a stranger, and that they would take the effort to signal that, like, here, come here. Amazing.
Yeah, I remember like wrapping presents for kids, and you would just write something like 5 to 6 year old, or 10 to 12 year old, and it would go to kids that weren't privileged enough to receive toys. And So I heard him saying that yesterday. I was like, oh, we should light a tree outside. Like we actually have a cut tree inside. I'm feeling pretty bad about it. Um, and
I
heard,
wonder though if the tree in the window is kind of the same idea. You know, the because a lot of us put the tree in the window so that people can see it from outside. So maybe it's a similar thread coming
yeah,
through.
wondering about having an outside tree that's like decorated with presents underneath, like labeled, that like, if you need a present, like that
Ah,
kind of would be cool.
that's a cool idea.
Yeah. But we better get out of the heart and get into the mind, or else we'll just
We'll just melt away.
in tears and goo for an hour, which I love to do. But I want to tell you about the mysteries, right? So what I realized, or actually, you know what, before I go there, I will say this thing, that there is this initiation that happens for kids that have younger siblings. And I want to know how Madeline's doing with Sophia, because, the kids who often sit at the kids' table or aren't part of the older crowd that gets to stay up after hours and the party's happening and all these things we used to do. Um, one thing that I feel is like an initiation or a secret handshake for them is that when they find out about Santa, then they get to move on the adult team and keep the mystery alive for the younger kids.
Oh yes. She is very much in sync and in line, and we like do the little eyes across the table, and there's all these like secret codes that we have to keep it preserved for sure.
Was she angry at you at all when she found out?
No, she's so God, with all that Scorpio energy, she like kind of knows, and she's there's something about her that's so adult already. And the cool thing is she knows magic also exists. She knows what magic is. And so for her, I don't think it like blew her world like it blew mine, because there still is magic. There's no question about that. It didn't obliterate that for her.
We watched this movie Klaus the other day, which actually I would really recommend. It was cool. We watched it with Koa, and we're like, okay, 10 minutes, and then it's bath time. And then we just 10 more minutes, because we couldn't turn it off, right? So we finished the whole movie, and he went late night, which is pretty hilarious. But the whole time it felt like they were actually just giving the big reveal about the Santa thing, but it's actually the Santa pre-story.
Hold on, please.
Yes,
I'm having unexpected visitors. So
okay.
keep going. I'm going to actually mute myself for just a sec.
And is it believers?
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to talk about Christ.
Great.
No, let's talk about trees more. And I want to talk about the tree of earth, which looks like this. Although typically we would say this is an imaginary thing, which I like to call the spine of Gaia. But I think many traditions have called this the world tree. And we hear it as Yggdrasil, or like many different names throughout cultures, different ages, different times, different places, and different languages. But Gaia's spine is the spin axis of Earth. If Earth is a wheel spinning every day, then the spine would be the axle, right? And there's not an actual thing there. There's not an actual tree, but really importantly, Gaia's spine defines the cardinal directions and also the places where our cardinal cusps, the cusp of the cardinal signs, are aligned. Because I feel in so many ways that this is the tree that we're talking about. And I'm going to show it in an astronomy software, which will kind of make it easier to see, I think. Well, did we just ruin it all over there, Amanda? Are we cool?
Okay. No, we didn't. Thankfully, everybody, what just happened is my two daughters just walked in. I was not expecting them. But thankfully, Sophia went outside, and the background noise was so loud that they couldn't hear anything that was happening. So
Beautiful. Yeah, I
we're
mean,
good.
there's something that it is really important, I believe, for us to offer honoring of myth and mystery. And, this whole idea of their imaginary friends and whatnot is parents who are sleeping to the possibilities of learning from our children who might not yet be so asleep that they can still see. And I think, one of the things that these Santa initiations always offer me is it's like, oh, what is my Santa Claus? Like, what is my belief? Or when I look around, I mean, it seems actually that the Christmas mysteries as being utilized by magicians on the other side has just become this kind of capitalism thing that keeps you all twinkly and avoiding the deep dive that the wintertime actually asks us to explore.
The other thing is what I've been noticing this year is that there's such an emphasis on magic being alive only right now. Like,
Mm.
this is the most joyful time of the year. This is when the magic comes to life. And it's like, well, what about the other 11 months of the year? Like, it's actually quite depressing that this is the most wonderful time of the year. You know, I think cultivating the perspective that there's miracles every day, all the time. There's magic all around us all the time. We just have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. But um, I think that's actually part of the program that then leads to so much depression around this time of year. And also that letdown feeling when it's over. It's like it's like when people refer to like high school as the glory days. It's like, wow, that's really sad because there's a lot more life after high school. And it's like that's the pinnacle. That's just a depressing thought, really. So I think it's
It's such a good point. And people who are alone for Christmas, which will, of course, will reach like all-time numbers this year, right? Like you're really being led to be depressed. I mean, this year, of course, they're like, connect with your family through Zoom video and think like all the ways we can, and I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a rich tradition, like going all the way back. Some people are not going to make it through the winter, right? I mean, modern times still, but certainly in the day, right? And so Yule on one level was like a celebration of all of the hard work that went into farming and harvesting and bottling or the equivalent and rationing the food that will make us help us get through. And it was like a party and a festival of lights and a huge feast. It's like we're actually going to eat more than we should. We're going to take a day or maybe a few away from that rationing trip and like show the gods that we have faith by like leaving food for them, but eating like more than our fill and like eating as if we were rich and it is the summertime and that kind of trip. So but if that's a few days, right, when it gets turned into these many days, I mean, and interestingly, this one's fun, like the 12 days of Christmas traditionally like begin on Christmas, don't lead to Christmas, right? It got turned through the capitalistic twisting of like, oh, a 12 days and you can buy something each of these 12 days and buy 12 winged ponies whatever. But the old ways, it was like, no, it starts at Christmas and that leads to Tres Reyes, or the Three Kings Day. So in many of the Latin cultures, like in Spain, presents are actually much more like they come around Epiphany time, right? Which is like 12th day of Christmas, where we're going. And that's like the adoration of the Magi and that, like the recognition of the Christ child. Go
Well,
ahead.
Saturnalia, which by the way, I introduced into our little winter festival ritual lineup this year. So we did our first Saturnalia, which I kind of teased the girls all, the months leading up. I was like, we're not doing Christmas this year. We're doing Saturnalia. And
No.
they were like, Mama, did you make that up? That's not even a real thing. I was like, no, it's a real thing. It's a festival for Saturn. And it lasted 7 days. And so anyways, we've been doing it. And it's the 17th to the 23rd. And so, but I've been using it as an opportunity to provide gifts that embody the astrology of the day. So today is Mercury, yesterday was Mars. So I just little fun things. And of course, we'll also do Christmas, but I wanted to start to connect it astrologically for them. Like there's an astrological significance. And I'm trying to think of my point.
No, well, that is the point, and I love it. Maybe Thursday could be like, oh, and Jupiter gives you Christmas back, right?
That's such a good idea. I love that. Oh, yes, that's good. But Yeah, so you were saying about the festivals. Oh, one of the things I was going to say is when in my research of Saturnalia, the government actually provided the feast for everybody, slaves and royalty. Everybody got to participate in this feast provided by the government, which is amazing if you think about it. And then in Hawaii we have the Makahiki festival, which is totally astrological. It's aligned with the Pleiades. So when the Pleiades rise in the east, that's when Makahiki started, and it was a 4-month festival. So yes, continue.
Yeah, so the acronical rising of the Pleiades when the sun is opposite them in November, but then also timed as we do in Hawaii to the moon. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that one of the things around Saturnalia, and it's always heavy to think about other times like this, but like slaves and masters, it said, would switch places at least for a night, and that the masters would then serve the slaves and that kind of thing. I mean, without taking that too far, it'd be interesting how that dynamic looks in your house.
We've already had this conversation. I was like, so basically that means if we're switching roles, you guys are going to be cooking dinner for me. Like I started to think about it because at first they were like, yes, we're in charge. I'm like,
I don't think that's how it looks around here. Yeah.
Like, you being in charge means you get to actually take care of me. Like, fantastic.
So then you're meant to wear the Phrygian hat, right? That's like that real red curly hat that you see. Well, you know, the Smurfs. So here's Papa Smurf, who's and this is Libra Smurf from the Zodiac set. He's got a very like Santa thing going on, Papa Smurf, and they live in mushrooms. And some say Santa goes back to the mushrooms. Some say it's the Coca-Cola bottle. Some say the red and white is the berries from the holly and the ivy. And it speaks as many of these seasonal traditions do to fertility, the ways that we always celebrated them way back, reaching into the old. And that's some of the things that we talked about in that podcast last year. And I think I refer to some places that you can go. There's a wonderful book of Winter Solstice by, I want to say John Matthews, I think is his name, and maybe his wife, that I'd really highly recommend checking out.
I can grab it at some point if you want. I can grab the book at some point if you want.
Yeah, I would love for you to show that, because I can't find my copy. It's we moved since just after we did that podcast last year. All right, so one thing I got to say I'm struggling with right now, and I would love for your help with this, is to how to make these Christmas mysteries that I'll present to you like interesting for kids, right? Because that's one thing that like kind of goes away with Santa. There we go. The Winter Solstice by who? John Matthews. Hey, with contributions from Caitlin Matthews. Cool. So can't find the book, and there's not an audio book or a Kindle version, I just found out. So you got to get some paper, which is good. It's a good thing with all this information going digital these days. Get a used copy, keep it on the shelf. And somebody sent me one. It's a really good book. Anyway, so yeah, I was just saying, Amanda, maybe you heard this or not, that I want to find a way to like make these more interesting and mysterious and that kind of thing, right? What I'm doing right now is like the thing that I do, which is kind of decoding some of these things in the actual sky and like the actual nature of the marriage of heaven and earth. And that's my devotion astrologically in general, right? Like I hear all these things and it's like, yeah, okay, like I come from the south node and go to the north node. Like, why? Because it works. Like, okay, that doesn't work for me, right? Like, give me a little bit of the heart of the thing. Like, give me the body of, give me the salt of the thing. Like, what is that? And then I'll sit with the sky and ask. And oftentimes I find confirmations for that which I'm being taught. Sometimes challenges of why would this work the same in both hemispheres, and you know, those things that we have to really face, I think, as tropical astrologers, if we want to not just say this is a symbolic language, but as I do, that this is the poetic breath of nature. But what usually happens is I do find confirmations from the sky, and then going to seek and asking these questions, I get so much more. And then I have this intimate connection, this understanding, and I've made friends with a bunch of beings up there. So I noticed one year, and it was actually in Japan, I have my picture right here, that Santa's actually in the sky. And this was a cool thing to hear. So yeah, I guess I'll just give the reveal photo, which is this one. And And so what you're looking at is the Ursa Major, the big bear, who has an asterism, or kind of a mini constellation within the great constellation, which is called to many of us the Big Dipper, right? Which is here. And in some traditions, that's known as the wagon or the chariot. Actually, slaves in America who were running from the South to find freedom in the North wrote this song that said, "Swing low, sweet chariot," because in the right times to go, which means it's not freezing cold, the chariot swings low. And the Big Dipper, it points to the North Star, right? So when you follow, it's another one is follow the drinking gourd, right? Because the chariot, the Big Dipper is the drinking gourd, and the gourd points to the North Star. So that's where to go north. But you can also, while the Dipper will show you the directions, it points in our day and age right to Polaris, the pole star, the North Star. The Dipper, and it's a little bit more advanced, I'm not going to get into it now, will teach you how to tell seasons just by what positions it's in when the sky gets dark enough to see. And there's so many other mysteries that are tied to the Dipper. It's amazing. But, you know, I had known that it was the wagon. It looks more like that. There's this weird thing around the bears of the heavens. This is the big bear, Ursa Major, and the little bear, Ursa Minor. And, you know, for people who are listening to the audio, get a picture of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But probably just go over to the video version of this podcast, because I'm going to show a few things. You know, it's weird that the bears of the heavens have these long tails. Like, bears don't have long tails. So it always was strange to me. And the wagon like made a lot more sense. Or this was also called the plow, right? In some agrarian societies, the Big Dipper. And it's amazing, bright constellation, the brightest thing in the north, huge, so recognizable, and tells us the directions. And so it's, it has a very, it's very well recognized, of course, by all Northern Hemisphere traditions throughout time. But what I realized this night was that it's Santa's sleigh. And I was interested, just rewinding this conversation, and I was asking my nephew and nieces what Christmas is about, and they had all these things to say about Santa and the elves and Mrs. Claus and their elf on the shelf, Joe. And I was like, that's it? It's like, what about the tree? What does the tree mean? And so we had that talk. They weren't offering much. And like, Christ didn't even come into the thing. It's like, it's not Santa miss, it's Christ miss, Christmas. So what about that, right? And what I've realized since is that kind of Santa is the gateway into this thing for me. Then these mysteries bring us to the tree, and then like the Christ stories open up. And that basically, as I was writing this little curriculum up, I'll show it to you, and people can take a screenshot if you want it. It's not like as dialed in as it will become. But it basically is how I teach sacred astronomy. I teach astronomy for astrologers, for many of the organizations. I like to call it sacred astronomy because I'm not just talking about mathematical equations and how to calculate a chart from some tables and that. I'm talking about how to get outside with your feet on the ground and see the chart in the sky and see the sky in the chart. And I really try to do that in a reverent, heart-centered, embodied awe of the sky and its mysteries way, not as some academic nerd, although I can't get away from my true personality, right? But I have had some complaints in the orgs, like for the Organization for Professional Astrology, to get certified, you go through my astronomical training. And it's been rare, but some people have been like, yeah, what's up with all the shaman guy stuff? Like, let's just get the science, right? So I will be teaching astronomy for astrologers later this year for Astrology Hub. And I'm excited because I know in this community, I can be a little bit more of like, get out there, have this practice. This is your soul work, because we can learn these things on the small screen, but it's nothing like the big screen, the living sky. You've got to do that to integrate this connection to the heaven and the earth that sadly astrology in so many ways is like forgetting. And, we've handed those keys of one half of our craft, which is on one side astronomy, the measurable heavenly happenings, and on the other side correspondences, the immeasurable qualities of those quantities. And astrology really is the rainbow bridge between the two. But these days, we just call it correspondences astrology. And astronomy is left to these cats who like calculate our tables, which we need to heal ourselves and help others heal themselves. But, in doing so, we've also just released a spiritual practice of the heavenly happenings. Now, I should say that astronomers, they're often, I don't think most of them would call this, but they're like in ceremony. There's so many people out for the Jupiter Saturn conjunction recently and noticing, of course, the synchronicity of it happening at solstice. And this is a big deal. And it hasn't happened for this many years. And you won't ever see them get this close in your life. And, and like eclipses, they're out there like more than astrologers are, who are often hiding at home. But I think that, there's a lot, of course, of predominance in the astronomical realms now of like materialism and rationalism, and that reverence for the sky and the living sky is often so missing. So it's one of my, I think my principal devotion in this life is to help astrologers remember to get outside and look up and reconnect our craft to where it came from in the beginning.
You are playing a pivotal role, a key role in this bridge and connecting astronomy and astrology. That's why we're so excited to have you teaching on our platform, because one of the things that was amazing was this Jupiter Saturn conjunction and how many people were paying attention. To me, it feels like for the first time ever. And I know that sometimes eclipses get that much attention and things, but I guess the summit at Haleakala was just jam packed with people. Like there were so many people up at the summit of the volcano that I live on, Haleakala. And that to me is so exciting. Everyone at Hula last night was talking about Jupiter Saturn and asking questions. What does it mean? And what's happening? And it's like, oh, wow, people are starting to look up and people are starting to understand there's a significance there. And like even comparing how many people were at our Saturn Pluto conjunction ceremony in January compared to how many were at the Jupiter Saturn conjunction ceremony in December. Huge, at least twice as much, maybe 3 times as many people at least joined us for the December one. But I think that's because we've all lived through this year.
Right.
We've all lived through, oh, whoa, that astrological thing actually did have an impact.
Because at the beginning of the year, it's like there's the astrologers with their prediction of something's crazy. Yeah. Now it's like, oh my God, they were so right.
Yes.
I got to get on the thing. But also, and I think it's important, it's one of the beautiful things about this year for those who have been privileged enough to be okay through this kind of dismantling of the old ways and the labor pains that we will continue to go through as a new world is born. And we really must midwife that, as we were talking about in the ceremony recently, to quote Tammy Brump, is that now folks have time to study what they want to study. So I have so many more students this year. I teach privately only, and people are just like, I've just been wanting to study for decades and decades, but I've been so busy with my job, and now I can do and study what I love. And then they'll, now work in their field that they love. And it is really nice to see so many people coming to astrology. And it's really nice to see so many people celebrating the Christmas star, right?
Yes.
It did not look like one star, did it to you?
No.
And I loved what you said, because I can tell that you've been looking, right? That they were like these two eyes that are getting closer, and the eyes are crossing, they're getting closer and closer. I've been looking at this for years now, and Jupiter and Saturn used to be, where I could like stretch my arms almost to their fullest and point to one and point to the other. And then every year they're getting closer. Right. And it's interesting how they show up in the skies. That sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes at night, and then they became these eyes, and now they've just passed by. I planned my plane back from Arizona yesterday so that I would take off just at sunset, but then I'm flying west, right? So the sun never was just setting for the whole plane ride. So I was just staring at Jupiter and Saturn the whole time. and asking this question, hey, which one of you guys is Santa? Right? you
The question of all questions.
totally, right? Are you guys meeting about this? Or because you, Saturn, you sound like Santa to me.
Yes.
And I heard Saturnalia, and I heard something about you rule Capricorn, and that's this time of year. But Jupiter, like people keep saying, you're like the fat and jolly dude. So you guys might want to, like, as long as you're meeting up there, like it's going to be 20 years, you might want to sort this out, right?
Yes.
And I'm all ears, so I usually like to listen to my requests, but every now and then. And I haven't heard the answer yet, but I will say that, there is, again, that like, let's get jolly, let's get Jupiter in the midst of winter. If you think, and this is Northern Hemisphere trip, right? But if you think about the classical domicile lords, let's talk astrology for a bit. It's Jupiter as Sagittarius and Jupiter as Pisces. And in the Northern Hemisphere, this is the first moment of winter when Sagittarius becomes Capricorn. And then the last moment of winter when Pisces becomes Aries. At least the suns travel through the signs, right? So if you think of it in that regard, Jupiter is holding the cold time. Again, like I don't like to usually speak so locally Northern Hemispheric, but this is a trip. And then so the signs in between, Capricorn, Aquarius, Saturn, right? Who's said to be the cold one, the slow one, and that kind of thing. And so I like thinking about Jupiter, Sagittarius from that regard as like, yeah, roll out the scrolls because it's clearly getting dark, y'all. And you want to make sure you're in line, but also look, it's going to be good for you. And I got your back. You're going to make it through. Seek in the darkness, And then on the way out, Pisces is like, see, here comes the sun, dude. I teach often like with the seasons, like the Beatles songs. So here comes the sun is that time of spring equinox. And the light now overcomes the dark of night. And then the summertime is like, oh my gosh, what is the one? Like, it burns my feet as they touch the ground. Oh, good day, sunshine. It's just such a summer song. And then for the autumn, it's someday you'll wake to see I've gone, but tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun, right? The sun falling. And then interesting, the winter is Sun King, which is, everyone is happy and they don't sound happy at all. Like everyone is laughing. Here comes the Sun King, right? And it ties into these old Sun King traditions and that kind of thing. But they're really cool transmissions around this time of year. We don't get Christmas songs. We get some religious Christmas songs and some songs about Christ. We get some Santa songs and that. But you don't really get any songs honoring the longest night. People in the comments actually correct me if I'm wrong and turn me on to this.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining.
Yeah, right. So the stars shine brightly longer because it's a long night. That's
right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's basically about the coming of Christ, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Christmas star a little bit. So the story is that the three kings, who interestingly are said to come from the east, followed an eastern star. It's like, would you go all the way around the world? So because, there's some have suggested and are calling this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction the Christmas star because there's a suggestion that maybe they're a conjunction in the sign of Pisces in 7 BC, which was very close, like this one we just saw, or are seeing, I should say, was the Christmas star. Now, there's some candidates. I was just talking to my first teacher, Daniel Jamari, about this, where in 3 BC as morning stars in the east, and then in 2 BC as evening stars in the west, Venus and Jupiter got together for a really close occultation, almost occultation like this. And when Venus is on the scene, now, that's when people are calling the police about there's a UFO. And, it's like, no, it's Venus. I'm not saying there's not UFOs, but oftentimes people are calling in Venus, right? It's like, no, that's the goddess. And so when Venus and Jupiter get together, that's going to be much more of like a shocking show. But I mean, I wonder if the star that we're talking about is called the sun. But the sun moving into a new age, which very likely was happening when Christ was born. And that was kind of the big deal about this shift for the sun. So now, earlier, I was challenging Santa Claus kids. Like now I'm going to challenge other folks, and you might want to split, which is like looking at some of the Christian stories, which I'm sure are that Christ, who told us he was the Son of Man, was talking about maybe S-O-N, but especially S-U-N. The English language came after, and I think this was a very purposeful homonym. And the Christ mysteries are tied to the mysteries of many other, let me say, solar guides or even solar deities throughout time. And I know some people struggle with that, and I don't want to offend you, but I will if you don't turn this off right now. So maybe go for it, or maybe not, and see what happens. So, but before that, let's play with old Saint Nick a little bit more. Hi, Hermes, this guy. Okay, so here's Santa's sleigh, and it's the Big Dipper. And the Dipper has this arc of stars that we say in astronomy, it's a great thing. You arc to Arcturus, who is Arcturus, the red-nosed reindeer. I forgot all their name, Dasher and Donner and Comet and Blixen, like all these cats, right? Which for me, I saw in the sky are the arc of the Big Dipper, the tail of the Big Bear, and then the train of reindeer continues through Boetes here, or Botes, or Bootes. I've never known how to pronounce his name correctly. The herdsman, who's said to be herding the deer. And I could tell you the Greek myth, but I want to stick with this one. And there is a bright star, the fifth brightest star in our sky, a super giant orange star called Arcturus, which for me is Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. Okay, well, let me show you another thing about this. And so I was on the roof at my sister's place in Tokyo, like tripping about why these kids are into the Santa thing and a little bit of tree and none of the Christ, and what does Christmas become? And there's so many presents and excitement for the next one before we even really like received, the one that was just unwrapped and that whole thing. And I'm kind of, I was living alone for a long time at the time. I was kind of on the bah humbug trip, honestly speaking. But I was looking at the sky and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Santa's sleigh. And the reason why I say that this is very much aligned to how I begin teaching astronomy for astrologers, although I'm thinking about shifting this, but I like to begin with what's called the primary motion. So this is Stellarium astronomy software, which is amazing, and it's free, by the way. This yellow curve is what's called the ecliptic plane. And that's the plane of Earth's orbital path about the sun. So from our point of view, as the sun orbits, or the Earth orbits the sun in a year, the way we experience that, of course, is here on Earth, we see the sun orbiting us. And if we extend that plane towards infinity, we encounter the constellations of the zodiac. So from Earth's point of view, the sun is always held by one of those 12 star groups. And it is the plane that certainly astrology is most interested in, because our solar system is relatively flat. So it's the ecliptic that hosts Venus and Mercury and Jupiter and Mars and Saturn and all the cats, right? But the other plane that you see here on the screen, for those of you who are watching the video version, that's this blue curve, that's called the Celestial Equator. And let me just break out my Earth here. That is Earth's equator projected into space. Okay, it's literally that simple. And if you think of our daily motion, right, which is our daily 24-hour spin on the world tree, Gaia's spine, right, that's the spin axis, the plane of our rotation, right? So if you think of Earth as like a wheel, the axis would be the axle, and then the plane would be like where the rubber meets the road, right? That plane is the celestial equator, and it's simply Earth's equator projected out into space. So when we watch the sky at night, like how we experience Earth's daily spin is by watching the sky spin. And Earth spins from the west to the east, right? This is actually why, like you'll see it on the camera here, like New York is gonna come into your view. You're the sun, okay? Before California, before Hawaii does. Because the Earth is spinning from the west to the east, right? We notice the sky rising in the east and setting in the west. It's a simple matter of relativity. And the sky spins around the axis in 24 hours time. So you can learn to find the axis in the sky. I'm going to turn around here north. I've got this cast for Richmond, California, where I live. And the Gaia's spine points in the heavens to places called the celestial poles. So let me put this away and show the globe again. Earth's world tree, our spin axis, emanates from the heart of Earth, where all earthlings are connected. It's the place we actually measure astrology from because it's global. And it passes through the terrestrial poles, right? So it passes through the south pole of Earth and Santa's home, the North Pole. And then it points in the sky to what are called the celestial poles. So we got terrestrial poles and celestial poles, right? These, by the way, on the Earth are not the magnetic poles. They're the spin poles, or the true north and true south. And so if you think about watching a bike tire spinning, you can see the spokes get all blurry, but there's one point that doesn't move, right? Which is the center of the rotation. And that's happening also in our sky. So the place where Gaia's spine, or the world tree, points is a fixed place in the heavens, and all of the other stars in one day's time spin about it. Now, the motion in the northern is a counterclockwise motion. Did I just mute myself? Can you hear me, Amanda?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So as I move this through time, like what you're going to notice is that all of these stars are spinning about Polaris, which is the tail star of the Little Dipper. Importantly, this changes over time, but it's going to be like that for your whole life. And so, as I said earlier, we can, let me get him back up above the horizon, and I'll pause this for a sec. We can follow the Big Dipper. We can arc to Arcturus. But the other thing to know about the Dipper, which there's many actually, it drops water on the lion and all sorts of other things. I'll show you another time. But if you follow the end stars of the Dipper, they're called the pointer stars, and you go about 4 times the length between the two, and it brings you to Polaris, to the North Star. And that's the tail star of the Little Dipper. So importantly, this train of Santa and his reindeer, not only do they point, oops, let me get them back on screen where I want them here. Santa and his reindeer being, again, the Big Dipper and the arc of the Dipper, and then the herdsman here to Arcturus, the red-nosed reindeer. That kind of super asterism points to the North Pole in the heavens, where all the stars spin about. And importantly, like all of the stars, it travels all the way around the sky in one day or one night, right? So this is Santa and his team of reindeer, like traveling all the way around the world to deliver toys to all the boys and girls and other beings during one night, right? And a cool thing, so I've shown this to kids around me, and they actually get really excited about it. And I would love to keep them out there until the sun rises. That's not happening. But the sun will rise, and you say, oh, but it just went away. Because this is one of the key reasons why I teach, and I'm not the first to, I find now that the 12th house is hidden things. It's strange to say that because the sun can't be seen in the first. It hasn't risen yet. It rises into the 12th. But as the sun rises to illuminate the earth, it hides the sky, right? But when that happens here in California, it's still night in Hawaii. And so you can say, no, you see Santa's now, he's just moving on to the next place. He's dropping off toys there. The sun will rise and then he's in the next place. And this is how he's able to cover the whole globe in a day. And very importantly, it points to the North Pole. And that, of course, again, in our day and age is Polaris, which, to bring it back to the tree mysteries, that is the star on top of the tree, right? So it's a very important star, Polaris, because it doesn't move in the sky. We see all the other stars moving about it. And what are the other like twinkling lights that we decorate our tree with? They're the stars. So we have the star on top, which is Polaris, and all of the stars. And this teaches what's called the primary motion, which is our primary experience of astronomy is day and night. So as the Earth spins, there's one star that doesn't move, and the rest are the twinkling lights. And that came to me actually when I was laying under a tree in Seattle one time, and I looked up and it was this really thick cedar tree, and there's just a little bit of pinprick lights coming through in all these places. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm inside a Christmas tree right now. And it looks like a starry sky. It was great. All right. So the next level, these are the first two, Santa and his sleigh, really just here to bring our attention to the first thing, which is the tree. And the tree being the spine of Earth, something we all share, right? And Santa teaches us about north and teaches about going all around the world in one day in his sleigh. But that should bring our attention back to the tree and to the lights on the tree, which are the stars, and to the one star that doesn't move at all, which is the North Star. So hopefully that is something you feel. And of course, the mysteries associated there, we'd really want to speak about what it is to be evergreen and why we string lights on the world tree and the star on top of the tree. All right, so the next bit you see here is Christ is born. The Virgin, the manger, the three kings, and the Christmas star. Now, there's a movie called Zeitgeist that turned me on to a trip that is kind of hard for me to see in the sky. Oh, this is weird. Stellarium's out of control. Which is basically that what they're claiming is that at Christmas time, and let's go to the 25th. Okay, here we are. So Christmas morning, when you look in the northern hemisphere, where of course Jerusalem is, you see the constellation called the Virgin. And earlier in the night, and I'm going to rewind time, so we're going to go to midnight here. So here's the old holy night and all. There's three stars in the sky that have long been called the three kings, who of course are actually the three magi. In other words, the three astrologers. And these three kings, interestingly, and this changes over time, it's very important, and it's a tale for another time, but Orion's belt in our day and age is aligned to the celestial equator, aligned to the plane of Earth's spin. And these are the three kings in the bright star that they don't really follow, but rather proceed, is Sirius. And some say that this is about the three kings, Orion's belt stars, that when they're looking through the brightest star of our sky, Sirius, which herself is associated in the mysteries from Kemet, the land we now call Egypt, with Isis, with the Queen of Heavens, who I'm going to speak about in just a second too, because that brings us to the Christian mysteries from an older tradition. But you can see that this line from the three kings through the Isis star, through Sirius, the bright star, the dog star, they point to the Holy Grail, interestingly, and they point to the Virgin here, right? I prefer to say priestess, but Virgo, the constellation, which is different than the sign, right? That's what Virgo means. And so some have suggested that that's the Virgin Mary. Now, what this movie Zeitgeist is trying to explain, it's as if the sun is right here and kind of being born of her, but that's not really how it works at Christmas time. That's like the sun is there in like November, late October, like right in kind of womb space where the sun is at Christmas time. And I'll just stop here at sunrise. Of course, it's going to look a lot more like that because the 12th house is hidden things, but the software lets us play. It's hard to see this as like the Virgin giving birth to the sun way down here, because you are going to see the scales in the scorpion. Now, if we go to like 2000 years ago, it's actually even further from that being so. So it might suggest that if Christ is the sun, he's born not at December time, right? Like that whole December 25th for Christ's birthday, that's not in the big book. That came around as part of the Council of Nicaea in the 3rd century, where like the Catholics had a big conclave to decide which Christian books were going to be kept in the Bible and which would be cast out, and many other things, including the Gregorian or the Julian calendar and much more. But anyway, so there's one thing that is a cool thing to see in the sky is just this idea of the 3 kings and how they point to the bright star in the sky, and that might be the star Sirius that the 3 magi were looking for. And it's an opportunity to really get to know some of the stories of old. So the star Sirius, the dog star, supposedly, you may have heard this term, the dog days of summer. Well, they are when the sun is so close to Sirius that Sirius goes what we call under the beams and has its heliacal setting where you can't see it for 70 days until the sun has passed the star far enough by for that sun then to rise, the star Sirius to rise before the sun, and it's reborn as a morning star. So it's said that mummification was a 70-day process, which was the period of Sirius's disappearance. Sirius, which was called Sothis, which was a calendar star and associated with Isis. So very short version of a story is that Isis's brother, Osiris, as they're known in the Greek language, was killed by their brother Set, who was jealous that Isis was his wife instead of Set's. And I mean, the story is long and beautiful, and Isis, after his first death, resurrected him. And that time, like, Set had trapped him in this beautiful sarcophagus and drowned him, but Isis found him and brought him back to life with some assistance. So the next time Set was like, all right, F that, he just cut him into 14 pieces and spread them throughout the land we now call Egypt. And it said that Isis and Nephthys, their sister, and Anubis and Thoth and others went searching for these pieces to put Osiris back together. And everywhere they found one of the great temples of Egypt was consecrated. And there's 13 of them because they couldn't find the 14th piece. It was thrown into the Nile, eaten by crocodiles, and that is the phallus of Osiris. And so they could put him back together, but even if they could bring him back to life, they would not be able to produce a heir to the throne. So Thoth created this magical golden phallus. And Isis, it said, turned herself into the falcon and flew above it, becoming magically impregnated by the seed of her king, of her husband, of her brother, Osiris. And then Osiris went through the underworld and became what today we call Orion in the sky. So Orion's belt would be Osiris's belt. And it said that Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, follows Osiris, that's Osiris and Isis traveling together. And here's an image of the moon looking at the sun from my camera at this time. I shot in Sedona. But some might suggest that their son, the product of their virgin birth, would maybe be this star. It's called Aldebaran, one of the royal stars, the eye of the bull. But that's not him at all, because it was well known that this child, this magical child born of a virgin birth, born of a virgin, was the sun. And his name is Horus. And Horus is the avenger, it said, because he is meant to avenge his father's death. And so Horus is in an eternal battle with his uncle Set, which of course is why we call the sun Horus setting Set. And that's when Set wins every night, and then Horus wins every morning when the sun rises. And it said that in the end, Horus will finish this battle and be the victor. But it's a really beautiful story, and there's many stories that point from around the world that point to this sacred place in the sky, which is Orion. I actually think that the manger of our sun is there. I should say that there are stars that are known as the manger, and there's like donkeys there. That lives over in the Crab constellation. But in the astronomers, by the way, like wouldn't agree. But I think many of the mysteries teach us that this place, which is Orion Nebula, is the nebula where not only so many stars that we know of were born, but that our own sun was born. So because why? Because we're told this is Osiris, and that this thing that we call Orion's sword would then be the golden phallus of Osiris, from which this magical seed that birthed the sun, right? They're like, in their tradition, there's no denying that Horus is the sun. This is an image close up from Hubble of the Orion Nebula, which is just this amazingly beautiful, mysterious birthplace of stars, and feels for me like very kind of vulvic, very like womb like. And so I love that that's happening in the golden phallus, you know. So, excuse me, the Maya, they call these three stars that surround the Orion Nebula and Orion's sword, as we call it. And it's the easternmost belt star and the 2 feet of Orion. They call those 3 stars the hearthstones because they say that they surround the smoke of creation. And the Maya today, still like in traditional villages, when a couple is married and they set up their new home, the village fire is brought to their home, and that they've already set up a triangular stones, the hearthstones, for the family tortilla grill, and that those 3 stars or 3 stones represent these 3 stars in the sky because they surround the smoke of creation. So I'm like, sure, there's actually other mysteries that suggest again and again that that's the place where our sun was born. So it's one thing I teach in these mysteries, that like the 3 wise men are at the manger of the birth of Christ, who would be the sun. So, you know, again, if that's Isis, is that Horus, Aldebaran, which surround Orion or Osiris? And no. This is a very intriguing math. And again, sorry to those who are just listening on the audio, check out the video version. This is one of the great constellational images that Cellarius painted, Andreas Cellarius. This is a map, a Christian map of the heavens, which is created by Julius Schiller. And so there's like Old Testament in the Ecliptic, and there's New Testament in different places. And it's pretty intriguing. But the thing that I think intrigues me most is that Orion in Julius Schiller's map is Saint Joseph. And he's holding like the Masonic compass and square and the acacia sprig, which
wait,
is
wait. Can you say that again?
Yes. Let's go back here. So this is Orion. All right. So what we know as Orion, Julius Schiller in the, I think 18th century, Christianized the sky. And he turned all the old Greek, you know, pagan constellations into good, healthy Christian constellations. Like Argo became the Ark, right? And I think, well, you know, like the 12 tribes are in it, the 12 disciples are in it. And I'll read some from a writing. But yeah, so what we know as Orion, or what in Egypt was called Osiris, Schiller Christianized as Saint Joseph.
Wow.
Right. So
basically,
the father,
that shows that that's the birth place or the birth phallus of the sun.
Right. I mean, and yes, I mean, it shows, I love where you're going with that. It shows to me that as Osiris, as Orion is Osiris, and this was likely known, is the father of the virgin birth of this child Horus, who is the sun, that in these later mysteries, these Christian mysteries, the father Joseph, right, is the father of this virgin magical birth of the son who is Jesus Christ our Lord, right? And now, I mean, it's a little less removed for Joseph. There's no golden phallus thing. It's an angel in a dream, right? Like, so it's not like it's 1-to-1. But interestingly, I mean, some suggest that Horus himself was born on December 25th in a manger. And actually, we better go there. Why December 25th? Because it's the solstice. And solstice means the sun stops. So what I'm really excited to show you in the sacred astronomy teachings is what I hope you'll go notice is that the sun does not rise in the same place on the horizons every day or set on the same place. And that at this time, it's both rising and setting at its furthest southern extreme from due east and due west. And then the sun stops at solstice and turns around. The Greek word for that is tropikos, for which our tropical zodiac is named. And now at the south solstice, which is a word that applies to both hemispheres, north and south, the sun will start its 6-month journey northward. Where, of course, in the northern hemisphere, that means now the days will grow longer. And this is a northern hemisphere tradition, right? So in that sense, it is the birth of the sun. Yeah, from the darkest night.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Where I live, I get to watch the sunset every night, and it moves, it goes like this, and then it goes back, and then it goes like this, and then it goes back. But so basically right now the sun has quote unquote stopped, and then it's gonna start to go back the other way.
Right. Think about those exercises where you run and then you stop and you come back the other direction and the coach is blowing that whistle and you just wish it would all end. Right.
Right.
I
Yes.
mean, I don't even want to say what they called them in my school, but when you're running and you stop and you pivot and turn around, you're stopped and then you start moving the other direction. In between the stopping points, you're moving as fast as you can. Those are the equinoxes. And at the stopping points, those are the solstices, right? So when the sun reaches its extremes, and you can see this, by the way, in the Cancer glyph, which shows us the sun moving 6 months one direction, stopping, turning around, going 6 months the other direction. And the moon does it every month. Cancer ruled by the moon, you see. But so it just stops and it's parked there for a while. And it's kind of December 25th-ish when you notice, okay, now it's heading back north. Crazy where I'm sitting, like I have to go in a Koa's room over there to see the sunset in June. And right now it's setting over here. Like in California, we're not even too far from the equator. I'm at 38. I'm the same latitude as Greece at Athens, but it's a huge journey. And the further you are from the equator, the more it goes. So very importantly, like there is astronomical truth of why so many Northern Hemisphere traditions celebrate the birth of the sun at solstice, at winter and December solstice time for the Northern Hemisphere, right? Winter solstice, Christmas time. And so there's nothing in the Bible about that. I mean, Gary Caton, our friend, just wrote a cool post, check it out on his page, about how it looks like Christ is an Aries. And there's something about, well, the shepherds and like really like in December time. And we have to honor that the weather's a little different in Jerusalem and that, but still, it definitely seems like a pretty spring-like scene. But anyway, there are certainly esoteric reasons why we want to link the birth of the sun to the days now beginning to come longer after the longest night. Another image would be at spring equinox, wherever you are, where light overcomes night, right? But of course, we celebrate that as the time of resurrection. And that's where these Christmas mysteries would go. I'm not going to quite get there today, but I do want to read this from Julius Schiller. And this is in a book by Christopher Warner that I found online, the Augustan Epic, Patriarch to Milton, right? And so it's in this chapter called Virgil the Evangelist, where he says Julius Schiller's monumental star atlas replaces all the traditional names of the constellations with Christian ones. The names of constellations in the Northern Hemisphere are inspired by the New Testament and early history of the church. Aries is now Saint Peter, for example. The Corona Borealis is Christ's crown of thorns. Cassiopeia is Mary Magdalene. Now that might feel like some great honoring of Mary Magdalene, finally. No, because the story of Cassiopeia, sadly, it's one that really can be rewritten, is that she's this queen who's tied to her throne so we can witness her every night. She also points to the North Star. So every night she tips upside down. And the story in the Greek story is that is the punishment of this queen who, with her husband, declared that the human is divine and better than the gods. And they took all the statues down and this kind of thing. And they were punished, and it leads to Andromeda and Perseus and Pegasus and all sorts of amazement. But, it's a story that could be rewritten. But I just want to say that much of it, because this isn't like some honoring of Magdalene. It's like, oh, yeah, she's the queen that we witness in her shame.
What's amazing to me is this thing too, prefaced with a dedication to Ferdinand II, assuring him that there is, quote unquote, nothing scandalous in this new map of the heavens, nothing adverse to the Orthodox Catholic religion or the laws of the Holy Roman Empire, or contrary to good morals. Like, whoa, it's astounding.
Right. What's interesting is that we, of course, and we were just talking about this in the Astrology Hub ceremony for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction the other day, is that we're moving from, a true transition now into full-on Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions every 20 years in air signs for the rest of our lives. And this shift from Earth to air, previously it came around the birth of Alexander. And that was also then accompanied, and not without violence, that's for sure, with like an amazing renaissance of philosophical happening. That literally probably led to the birth of Western astrology. There was another time, the next time actually, which would have been 800 years later from that Hellenistic era, when actually it was the kind of dark ages, thanks to the church, where a lot of the Hellenistic wisdom and the astrological wisdom was completely buried to the Western experience, right? Burned at the stake. The next time was the time that we historically call the Renaissance, 800 years after that. That was the last time, 800 years ago, when these great conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn in their greater elemental cycle moved from Earth to air. And at that time, it was a huge resurgence of Western astrology, which actually likely, right, is what produced the Renaissance. In part, this was recovering from the plague, and then I'm sure people have been looking into that this year. But like Cosimo de' Medici had his agents scouring the globe to look for the ancient scrolls for everywhere, like in Tibet. And when they found the Corpus Hermetica, right, like the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, like he had his translators stop Plato to tune into Hermes. And in so many of those transmissions, there is astrology, there is the zodiac. And this was the return of kind of a classical Western astrology, which had been missing thanks to the church's burnings. And fascinatingly, in this time, because really we've been transitioning from the so-called Christmas star from Earth signs to air signs, like since the 1980s, there were conjunctions on New Year's Eve, 1980, and twice in 1981 in the sign of Libra. And then Earth sign conjunction in Taurus in 2000, and now we're full stop with this Aquarius conjunction a couple of days ago on December solstice 2020. In 1993-ish, Project Hindsight was born, which is like a whole nother level of Western astrology reclaiming translated text and other information from our Hellenistic roots. So fascinatingly, in all of these so-called Christmas star, if you will, like Jupiter, Saturn conjunctions and cycles through the elements, there has been a resurgence of Western astrology that has led to a renaissance of philosophical ideas. And, it's wonderful that Astrology Hub is a huge part of this at our time right now.
Wow, that is mind-blowing, Brett. Okay, so we've covered the tree, we've covered Santa and the sleigh, we've covered the birth, the birth of the sun.
Yeah, so let me just do two quick things and we'll kind of tease these and we can go into them deeper next year.
Part 3. All right.
Which feels right? So this is where we are in review. We got the jolly Santa on his sleigh, which is Big Dipper leading with the train of reindeer to Arcturus, the red-nosed reindeer, and that every night those constellations in the northern sky circle all around the world, delivering toys to all the girls and boys, and that, right?
Can you stop
And
screen sharing, Brett, please?
what's that? Stop screen
screen
sharing?
Yeah, yeah.
We're just gonna have to watch those animations again because there's 2 more slides I want to show there. So yeah, well, let me just at least show Saint Nick as I say that, right? So here's Santa and his sleigh and the reindeer pointing to Arcturus, the red-nosed reindeer, and that they circle the globe. And that brings us to the tree, the world tree being Earth's spine, which points to North celestial pole. In our day and age, there is a star that lives there called Polaris or North Star. That's the star on top of the tree. And the other stars that we decorate the tree with are all the other stars in the sky. And that reminds us of this primary motion, this daily motion, this spinning of the earth. And that's one of the most important things for us to renature our astrology, because it's weird, we don't see the sun moving through the signs as much as we see every day the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And it's a source of great confusion with astrology students. And I'm always like, no, check this out. And, so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to teach a lot of people in this community, just go outside, witness this. Now let's learn to see it in the chart, and we can kind of heal some of those sources of confusion that we're all meant to be in this initiation, because nobody's teaching us about how the sky moves. But what a wonderful opportunity when the mystery of Santa goes away to engage with these new mysteries of celebrating the magic of nature and her marriage with Earth in the heavens, All right, so let me just finish this thread. The next bit we get to is the birth of Christ, which is this mysterious thing. And it brings me, mysteriously into Osiris and Isis and the birth of Horus. This is like higher level mystery, right? But we get to learn, I think, a lot about Christ. And so this is the most important bit, I think, here. He says the planets of the solar, so this is Julius Schiller's Christianized constellational map. The planets of the solar system also have new names. Saturn is Adam, Jupiter is Moses, the sun is Jesus Christ, the Earth's moon, the Virgin Mary. All right, so, it's not like I'm the first cat to suggest that the son of our sky, who was once the virgin child Horus, is also the virgin child Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not going to say that the sun cannot incarnate as a human being or a divine being and do all the things that the big book says. There's very little history of that, but I don't want to challenge that. Sun can do whatever the F the sun wants to do, as far as I'm concerned. Like when people say Hermes wrote the tablet, heck yeah, he did. Like, I have no problem with that, right? For me, these are very powerful beings, well beyond anything I could possibly conceive of, But I do want to say that at least this goes back to Schiller's time. This is 1627, where people were seeing Jesus Christ as the sun in the sky. And he's writing this to the Pope, you know what I mean? And not being burned. So there's something in the esoteric tradition. And I'll show you another time how the sun on the cross and what Easter is where the ecliptic crosses the equator, these 2 planes that define the very real sacred astronomy of the tropical zodiac. It's very astronomical. The sun on the cross is simply Easter time, when the sun is east of the center of the earth, where we are all one. Now, the crucifixion, we're told, was attended by 3 Marys. Right? Magdalene, the Virgin, and another Mary. And I think importantly, this is actually speaking to the 3 moons. The waning moon, right? Which is the maiden, and the full moon of motherhood, and then the waxing moon of the so-called crone. I know some people have a hard time with that word. I love it. For me, that means the wise sage. And when do we see the moon and the sun together, but only at total solar eclipse time? So it's fun to be connecting again in the season of total solar eclipses. That's what first brought me to Astrology Hub Podcast in 2017. And of course, we just had an eclipse recently. So I'm going to show you just quickly here the Christmas mysteries, and we did level 1. Here comes Santa Claus and a bunch of things you can read about there. Some of these things we didn't speak about much today, like All Father Odin who hung in the tree, but we did get into that some in the podcast last year, which was episode 58. You can find that on YouTube and other places. Level 2, which really should be level 1, but the kids are already Santed up. Most of them. So that's the O Christmas tree and the idea of the evergreen, the lights, and the big star on top. And then we get to what it's kind of meant to be about, right? Which is Christ is born. And that brings me into the reason for the seasons, the idea of the virgin, the manger. And then Mary brings me to, so Christ himself just brings me to what are his 12 disciples. Yeah, they're called the 12 signs, right? By the way, Didymus Thomas, one of the 12 disciples, right? Or apostles. Didymus means twins. Thomas means twins. In other words, that guy you and I call Gemini, all right? So, I mean, this is not that veiled, actually. So the 12 tribes for a previous tradition, the 12 apostles for this Christian tradition are the 12 signs of the zodiac, which have been honored by the mysteries in all lands for a long time. So when I follow the sun, we get into the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles. But why are there 12 signs? And some would suggest, at least astronomically, this is because there's 12 months. So we need to bring in the Mary. And Mary, the moon, traveling with Christ, the sun. And there's these 3 Marys at the crucifixion. So we get to the waning and the full, or the waxing and the full and the waning moon and eclipses. Right. And that's always like, this is literally the order in a different language set in which I teach sacred astronomy for astrologers. We do primary motion in the world tree. We do the seasonal energies and the sun moving through the signs. We bring in the moon and we do the lunations and synodic cycles like Jupiter, Saturn, the meetings of planets, which the moon, sun system, the monthly system, we should first tune into, as Astrology Hub has been doing since its beginning. And then the last one of these, I'm not going to get into now, but it has to do with why I would say that special Christmas star, the 3 magi, the 3 astrologers we're following, is actually the sun. And you can say, well, so what? I mean, the sun rises every day. Well, at that time, it was aligned for the first time in 26,000 years to the last stars of the Fishes constellation. And so we were moving from the age of the ram, a child was born who was the good lamb and the good shepherd, right? To the virgin, right? And that's the Aries thing, but then he became the fisher of men and like moved into Pisces. And these are like higher mysteries of what's called axial precession in the ages, and these stories of, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. If people are really excited about pursuing that thread, you can go to my website, which is geminibrett.com. And on the offerings page, there's a movie called The Sun on the Cross and the Turning of Ages, where you can take these things a little bit further. But for now, I think that's enough of the Christmas mysteries. Now, I want to make them exciting and interesting and have kind of mystical essence. And, that we should do, I think, as a community. So if people want to team up, if you have some ideas, like if you want more clarity about some of these astronomical themes, I will be teaching that soon enough and it will really land for you. But if you have some ideas of like how we can bring it in and make this interesting, please speak up and share and let's together create like whole other levels of these Christmas mysteries so that when the sleigh gets pulled out from under our feet, we don't think magic went away. We realize we're just ready for the next level of it.
Oh, God, I love that so much. And part of it is going to be trying it on. So when I hear these kinds of things from astrologers like you, and I get all excited about it, and it's really astrological. It's so funny. My daughters are like, Mama, you think everything's astrological? I'm like, yes, because it is. But
exactly.
Yeah, but I tried the stories on, and obviously they need to be like simplified and pared down, but we can do it. I know we can do it. And I love the idea of everybody sharing, like, how are you explaining the sleigh and the reindeer as Ursa Major going over to Arcturus? Like, are you showing them? And, how are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
doing it?
So that literally, and I have done this with kids, and it's great. And they're like, "Oh, cool!" Right? It's
Oh,
like I just point to them in the sky, and I say, "Can you see Santa's sleigh?"
right, right,
Right? Oh, wow. And can you see the train of reindeer? And look at that one. They're like, it's Rudolph. And I never say it, right? Because it's
right.
Taurus is such a bright red star that it's every time I've done it. It's maybe 5 times now with different kids, parents, kids that want to do this. They're like, it's Rudolph. And there's so much excitement. Then we'll sit out there and watch for a couple hours and watch how it's moving around. And I'll
Right,
say, do you see how all the stars move? And they're like, why? Like, what's happening? Right? Because nobody's tuning our kids into this
right,
because the
right,
earth is.
right.
Uh, so, I
Well,
mean,
in the tree
ideally, I
part,
want to write this up as like a handbook for
right.
parents, right?
Yes,
With easy pictures and when to go
yes.
and where to point and that kind of thing. But I will say, once again, like what it's missing right now is a little bit of like the special sauce, like a little bit of the magic and the mystery. And, that is my thing. But right now, that thing's being applied to many other realms. And so I want to collaborate here and like team up and have counsel. So let's get
Yeah,
the together. Let's talk about how we can whisper these beautiful spells. And I guess, let me say, like, counteract the very strong magicians who have turned these traditions into consumerism, distract. Because we want to celebrate these beautiful holidays in a way that bring us back in to our bodies instead of running away from them.
Brett, the essence of these things is so beautiful. And so when we can pair it back to, and we can find that essence in them, it is actually a magical discovery. And I'm with you. There's that period of time where you sort of go through the bah humbug, like, because there's the what we've been told, then there's the transition period of like, well, but then what is it? Like, what's the point of doing any of this stuff? And then there's the rediscovery where you get to own it and bring it, like you said, into your body and have a different association and meaning with it. So it's a process. And I agree with you that the predominant storyline is so very loud and strong that it requires a very conscious effort on our part of introducing these new stories, whispering these new spells. I love that. But really what they are, they're just bringing us back to the true essence of these celebrations, these festivals, these rites of passages, these celebrations of life at different times of the year. And that is one of the things that the Steiner and the Waldorf schools do so well, is bring us back to that festival, celebrating with the seasons and doing seasonally aligned celebrations.
Totally. And it's good to have one character that goes through all of these things. Like all the pagan mysteries had that. And it was typically a solar deity if we're talking about an annual happening, right? Or, and this is such a beautiful truth too, like the marriage throughout the moons of the sun and the moon, right?
Mhm.
I want to end by, well, not end, but reading this Buckminster Fuller quote, which, I had to just go look it up real quick as you were sharing. If we had Rick here, he just like, he knows them all. But Buckminster Fuller told us this, that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You change something, or to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. But I'll kind of take that next level, right? Which is like, you don't even have to make it obsolete. Like you can actually use those characters and you just say, here's their next chapter.
Yes.
Right. And that's kind of what's missing. Like, I want to write this in such a way that it has that, like, not fictional, but like story quality. Because when I'm just pointing out stars in the sky, it's great, but it's not like elves and the things that we want to hear, like at
Right.
storytelling time. And we want to kind of just level those up. Like if you watch the Harry Potters, like the first one, it's still not good for young kids. Like it's crazy, but it got more and more adult, and that's how these things should happen too. And I'm sure there's levels I've not yet been initiated into. And so some of this will have really landed for you people out there. I'm sure, you wonderful, amazing people. Thank you for joining us in ceremony, and happy holidays and Christmas and solstice and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all the things to you. But the ones that did, like, make them yours and see where it goes, please, and report back to the North Pole. The one other thing I'll say is, one of the reasons why I personally was in my bah humbug space, I mean, for some reason it was like I was alone and my sister had like the kids in the family and was doing the thing. And so I was a little bit like I'm behind schedule, or it didn't work out as it was meant to and all that. But a huge part of it was like going home to sit at the family table and just feeling like so depressed about how everyone's just like conversations about people's jobs and how much money they make, and these, and the gossip. And when I would try to talk about my thing, it was just like, oh, that's the weirdo. And so, I think that it's interesting that sometimes we feel most isolated when we're in a crowded room, but we feel like we're the only ones who are seeing these things that others choose not to see, which I would suggest is the principal role of the Santa mysteries as employed by the powerful dark magicians on the other side of the scene. But maybe that whole story is my own Santa. I honor that, right? But I think importantly that this is a time now where we can say, oh, most of us won't actually get to experience the family gatherings, like big family gatherings that often we do. Like I'm in that, like my mom's 2 hours away, but she's not coming up because, the TV told her not to and all that. And I want to honor her wishes. And, but so it's a time, I think, where we can say, yeah, that thing that often hangs me up, like it shouldn't at all, because what these times really are about is keeping the light, right? And the light is love. So hopefully in a time where this whole year, as Amanda said earlier, we kind of been put in our place. What's going right? I loved hearing what you and Anna were saying this morning. And it's like, yeah, we used to say they should teach us in school. They should, and no, wait, oh, they is we. And we starts with me.
Totally.
And let's get that going. And so we have had an opportunity this year to really start rewriting the story in the way it should be told and heard and experienced. And this is an effort that really wants to be in that alignment. And the most important thing, I think it's interesting in our separation, is we want to honor the beauty of family and the beauty of community. So it really like just warms my heart that I'm part of this Astrology Hub community right here in my home with my beloved Scorpiana, but in so many ways. And Amanda, it's always such a treat to come here and play. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it is this time of, with this, like we were just talking about, with the education system and the schooling, with the holidays, with all these things that we've all just been like, yeah, we do it. And it's like, it's okay. But I don't like that it's so consumer, it's so focused on the gifts and like where's the soul and where's the meaning? And it's this, instead of like, why don't they do it the way I'm seeing it could be done? Why don't they care about what's important? It's like, well, again, who's they? Let's just take it back in. We get to do it. We get to do it together. And we get to actually share that vision that we've been holding, those things we question, like, why is it done like that? That doesn't like really feel right to me, or it just doesn't like
why do we cut down a tree
resonate.
to honor immortality?
Right. Yeah. Like
What?
none of that really resonates. Okay, well, now is our time to rewrite and rethink and revise and just come up again with the thing that does work and does feel. It's like, wow, well, that, we could go on and on. I mean, and I literally could, and we do. And that's why we have as many shows as we have. And that's, I mean, this holiday season, it felt so important to me to create a lot of really inspiring and thought-provoking and hopefully the kinds of things that help you remember like your visions, because we have this, quote unquote pause, whatever you want to call it. We have this year where it's disrupted. Like the status quo is certainly disrupted. And so we get to be so intentional with what fills that gap. We can keep letting autopilot go and let it fill in for us, or we can go, okay, pause. Let's harness this and use it and create something really intentional and really real and really true. So
So I
hopefully,
recommend people like reach back to their roots, like to the roots, but also your own roots. Like if you know where your ancestors come from and like cruise into that and see what was done around this time to honor the darkness and the coming of the light and all that.
yeah,
And so tuning into the old, but also when we dream in the new, and when we do this in a way with our feet in the soil and our hearts open, the mysteries literally will speak true. It doesn't have to be getting to the oldest translation of the thing. If
right.
you're willing to make yourself a conduit for the voice of spirit, right? And this is what we want to do. And so the other thing too is like I'm very blessed to have some family I will be with, but it's nice to be with this family. And I know that's true for so many people out there that as you say, Amanda, this is Ohana, this is family, this is sharing breath. So I'm so glad to talk story here. I just thought when you said pause, my friend Maria Stark is a magical bard, magician, musician. And I years ago on more like the bah humbug side, we did a podcast called the Santa Pause, which you can find on SoundCloud, but definitely no kids around for that one. But if you want to have a few laughs with your eggnog, tune it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, Ohana family. So this is something that I would love to dream in together. So I will be coming back and reading the comments here. And if anybody wants to connect and like sit in council and think about ways that we can do this, that can like actually land and work, like please do. Like I'd love to sit and tune in with you. So
And then
thanks again,
Astrology Hub
Amanda.
will publish it for you with
Sweet.
you.
Love it.
Yeah, I
Love
know
it.
it's that's exciting. Okay, couple things, everybody. Brett is going to be a regular um part of our like heartbeat here at Astrology Hub, and those shows that you count on every week. You have Anne, you have Rick. We're gonna have Seeds of Light for the parents. I can't even say for the parents, for people that have children in their life and or have ever been a child. Well, we have that. And then Brett is going to be joining us for storytelling. So this is um, our dedication, our commitment to helping to make the sky come to life for you and to help you connect in more deeply and more intimately with the sky, which in my own journey, and I am like not even close to where Brett is at. Like I'm a baby too. So I'm learning, I'll be learning with you. As part of the reason why I'm so excited to do the show. It's like, oh, I get to learn some really new cool things. But I have to say and you've heard me say this, that connection that I now have that I'm cultivating with the actual sky is a game changer. It
Mm.
it it, it changes everything about how you're even you doing these mysteries this year, Brett. I caught so much more because I've been using my little star chart app and I've been out there looking. I'm like, oh, Arcturus, I see that one all the time. It's it's a process, and we all have to be gentle with ourselves when we're learning and going, oh, how come I don't
So
know
important.
more? How come I don't know any of this? How come that elliptical thing confuses me?
Yeah.
Um,
It should, because it's confusing. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to give like lesson number one. It's this, because I face it all the time, right? It's science class, and you were taught if you don't understand a thing that you're dumb, and we shut down and we get scared of the numbers, and like it's a plague because of the way that our programming is brought instead of true teaching, which is honoring a love for some wonder. This is the password to the temple of the sky. It is the energy of awe.
mm,
Look up. You will never know it all. You can't. So release yourself from any expectation that you should or embarrassment. Like get rid of that shit, because the sky's not going to let you in when you show up with, I'm a bad student. She's going to let you in when you're like, I am a happy participant. And so it's literally when your heart says ah, and it usually sounds like a like kind of lunatic giggle because
yeah.
it's overwhelming, then the sky
Oh,
just opens up.
oh God, yes. This morning I was driving early and Venus was just right
Mm.
over Haleakala, and I went, oh, Venus. So he looks so beautiful in the morning. And that this is it. So yes, thank you for that. And we will remind you of that over and over. And I will be the humble student, embarrassed and asking questions that seem silly, just to help you feel, well, because I actually have those questions, and also to help you know that it's okay. We can have these questions, and it's just fun. We're just going to have fun with it. So Brett will be with us once a week for storytelling. And then in the spring-ish, we will be doing the astronomy, astrology, sacred astronomy. We don't have a name yet, but we will class for those of you who are interested in going even deeper into these mysteries. So Brett.
I chose for you, Amanda, the cup of Mary, the cup of the moon today. And I chose the cup for me or for all of us, the circle cup of Santa Christ. And just to also show that, because our first storytelling episode on like the regular heartbeat of Astrology Hub, which is so amazing, will be around Amanda's solar return time. And so what I'm going to talk about is some like embodied, get your feet outside, astronomical practices of how to do a solar return right. Like get your face out of the chart and go drink the light, the time when it aligns where it was when you were born. So I'm really excited to be starting at that sacred time for you.
Not only is it going to be around my birthday, it's going to be on my birthday. We were looking at the calendar. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll want to do some other things that day. And then he's like, yeah, but we could do an episode about how to actually look at the sky on your birthday and like, imprint it and do all kinds of crazy things I don't even know yet. So then I was like, okay, well, that sounds fun. Let's do that. And I would love to celebrate with all of you. That sounds amazing. So thank you, Brett. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing these mysteries with us. Thank you for always getting our eyes up into the sky and always reminding us to keep our feet rooted on the ground as we do that. And thanks to all of you. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your sincere and earnest desire to know, to connect, to be a part of, which you already are a part of, all of these mysteries. And we're so grateful that you're here. Thank you for tuning into this episode, for being a part of our community, and as always, for making astrology a part of your life. Mele kalikimaka. And we will see you again soon. Take care, everybody.
Ho, ho, ho.